now.
Well, hello everybody. It's been a minute since we've been live. You know what? No excuses, but I've been so busy with the business. I just, you run a little ragged during the week, and you have to set some things aside so you can continue to function. So that's what I've been up to. We have a real good show in store for you tonight. I have my good friend Bob Blayone joining us, and we're going to talk about Agenda 2030, World Economic Forum as it relates to Alberta. And Bob has quite a bit of information in that regard. So without further ado, let's bring Bob in. And I am well, Michael. How are you, Bob?
Good, Mark. How you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you, my friend.
You as well. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. I wore my special shirt just for you tonight. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you aboard, my friend. I think this is the first time, isn't it?
It is. We've had Zoom meetings before, but we have never done live. And I was looking forward to this. It's a long time coming, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. So everything is good with you and Dana?
Yeah, we're still in the process of moving. Like yourself, life is busy, and we got a lot on the go, but we're getting there. And in the middle of that, we're fighting for the future of our children here, as you are.
Yes, we are. We
Yeah.
sure are.
Crazy days in Alberta. I tell you what, the political theater is hot and heavy. So when you are aware of the agenda,
Yeah.
you see it clearly.
You see it every day. 100%.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, I just want to talk a little bit about. We originally had October 21st reserved for a march against Agenda 2030. We've since moved that date to November 4th. So for all you folks out there, November 4th, 1 o'clock, it's a Saturday. I chose to move it because the United States of America is having a Protect Your Children protest throughout that nation, all 51 states. And it's sort of bleeding into Canada as well. So I didn't want people to get mixed messages and trying to figure out which protest they're going to attend. So I decided to make an executive decision and move it to the November 4th. And that gives us a little bit more time to plan and to lay some groundwork for that protest. So anyways, Bob, how do you want to start this show off?
Well, Mark, I asked you a while back, I can't remember when one of the first conversations we had in person, you've been aware of this agenda for much longer than I have. I've been, well-researched in the climate change fraud, and I did my due diligence there and reaching out to Professor Mike Hume from London, England. And I can honestly call it climate change, carbon tax funded criminal fraud for what's going on and how it's hurting Canadians now.
100%.
But a lot of people don't understand the 30,000-foot view, Mark, of what this agenda truly entails. And I'm glad, like we were talking earlier, that people are calling this out for what it is. This is fascism on a global scale. There's people that have been working behind the scenes for a long time, since 68, is that right, working on this agenda?
Yep.
1968. So I would just ask if you could just do a rundown on what this agenda entails and give everybody
Yeah, absolutely. So, they've been at this globalist game since really after World War I. They started with the League of Nations. That was an abject failure, obviously. with the commencement of World War II. And then after World War II, they tried it again with the United Nations, and they've been at this for a very long time, and they've been working towards this. So again, as we move forward to the late 60s, it was the Club of Rome, sponsored by the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Schiffs, the big bankers, created the Club of Rome. And that essentially was when the agenda was first conceptualized, as a all-encompassing control mechanism for all humanity across the board on this planet. And so here we are, and as there was some evolution from the time they first conceptualized this agenda to where it is today. Obviously, there's been some evolution, and it took them a while to get sort of some. It started out with 8 goals, then it moved to 10 goals, and now it's of course at 17 goals. And so there's been that evolution, and as you look, and I mention this in every town hall that I do in regards to this topic, it started in the late 70s with global cooling. We were all going to freeze to death at some point. And that was the fear and the propaganda that was laid to instill fear into the masses and get them to overreact. And as it turned out, global cooling didn't materialize because it was never backed by actual science. And then we sort of moved into acid rain, the depletion of the ozone. That really never materialized into anything significant. And then they changed from that narrative to global warming. And then, of course, they identified CO2 as being a contributing factor to global warming on the planet, a fundamental building block of all life on Earth. Yeah. And I should back up a little bit, because after World War II, the two ideologies most responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths on this planet, we've seen a convergence, and that's fascism and communism. And people get sort of caught in the weeds because they were taught that the fascists were on the right. But if you look at who the Nazis were, they were the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, which tells me, and when you look at this political spectrum, they're firmly on the left, right beside the communists. Yeah. They're authoritarian, they're totalitarian. They want to dictate to everyone exactly what the terms of your life are going to be. And so I see both of those ideologies firmly on the left. And the way I look at the political spectrum is the further you move to the right up to the point of anarchy, is the more freedom you cherish, the more liberty you cherish, the more justice you cherish. And that's essentially what's under attack here, is Western civilization. And they want to destroy what Western civilization represents. And we can talk about those values, the values of freedom, liberty, justice, sovereignty of individual nations, equality under the law, the rule of law, prosperity, and the truth. All of those are under attack through the creation of this agenda. They need to destroy the values of Western civilization if they're going to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So as we move along, global warming never materialized. Florida was supposed to be underwater by 2010, according to Al Gore, and New York was supposed to be an aquarium by 2010, which of course never materialized. And then you look at the bankers who are still funding mortgages on beachfront property.
Right.
Well, there's another indicator right there that this is all a bunch of hogwash. And so they had to change the narrative, and now they've changed the narrative to climate change. And just so the people listening understand, since the dawn of time, our climate has changed. And since humanity has come to planet Earth, we're really good at solving problems and inventing and our ingenuity to solve the problems that, nature throws at us in the form of climate change. We can adapt to these sorts of things. We don't need an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity dictating to the rest of us how we're going to solve these problems. So, in a nutshell, that's globalism, and they want to control all aspects of everybody's life through this agenda. And if you go through the agenda, and there's a link on my website where we go through each one of the 17 goals, and I encourage people to go check that out at ffcs.info. So that's where we're at, Bob. That's where our nation is at. That's where the world is at, and this is what they're attempting to do.
Yeah, and that's it's all about control. Men and women wishing to control humanity globally in a fascist manner with the technocracy now that they have at their disposal to use big tech and big pharma and all of this stuff coming at us like a freight train. My conversations with Professor Hume, that was really a great education for me. I'm like you. When I see something that doesn't add up, I'll dig and dig. So,
Right.
What Mike told me, first thing he did was put me onto the Goddard Institute of Space Studies, and he said, have a look and tell me what you think. And so I looked back, and the data goes back to the late 1800s, temperature data, all these temperature stations around the world, thousands and thousands. My first question to Mike was, Mike, why did they pull down the original data by 0.75 of a degree? And he said, great question, Bob. They shouldn't have. So Mike left the IPCC when they implemented carbon taxes because he knew it was fraud. And it was interesting to see Mike was one of the signatories of the Great Barrington Declaration also. So there's a man that saw this coming also. And, we both met Christine Anderson in February in Calgary, and I was happy to have the opportunity to ask her the question if she understood where this agenda came from in relation to its arrival in Alberta and Canada. And she said it. She said the politicians and political parties are not important because they are all puppets to those pulling the strings. So
100%.
Yeah, and that's what's happening. And we've been betrayed in a very big way as we were running our businesses, raising our families and trusting people somewhat, trusting conservative politicians in particular. We know that the Liberals and the NDP are socialists, that they're a Marxist ideology, but I had no idea at my time at the UCT what these individuals were involved in.
Right.
A lot of the people that I reference in this document here, I've had conversations with, and it's horrifying. And now I see this. People are looking for hope. Albertans are looking for hope, and they're latching on to these organizations that are leading them down a dead end road.
Well, so Bob, just to expand on that a little bit, I'm finding, as I do more and more town halls in Saskatchewan, more and more people are begging for somebody to tell them the truth.
Yes.
And that's the response that I get when I do these town hall meetings is they want somebody to tell them the truth. They've been lied to for decades by our politicians. And at the end of the day, that's sort of, in a weird way, our fault. Because we've been fat, lazy, and complacent for decades. We haven't held our politicians accountable. We just, elect them and expect that they're going to have our best interest at heart, which we know is not the case. We know they don't have our best interest at heart. Their focus again, is an agenda created by an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity. And then when you when you look at, there's a study that came out of the Lancet a couple of years ago. It's actually still on the NASA website, believe it or not, where they said they sent out a bunch of researchers. They could have called me and saved themselves a bunch of money. I'm an arborist. I understand photosynthesis. I understand grade 6 science. And I understand how important CO2 plays in all life on Earth. Without CO2, this idea of net zero is pure insanity. Yeah. We need more CO2 to create more trees, more vegetation, and that's exactly what this body of researchers went out and discovered. And the question that was presented to them is, please tell us why the Earth has been greening over the last number of decades. And the reason it's been greening more is because there's a higher level of CO2 in the atmosphere. So how is it that, when you look at photosynthesis, you look at grade 6 science, how is it that CO2 can now be a pollutant? I'll tell you how, because it's a funding mechanism. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's a funding mechanism based on creating fear amongst the population, so they buy into this complete hoax, and that's exactly what it is. And it's meant to fund this agenda. Back in the day, 2012, they put together a committee at the UN that was trying to figure out how they could raise enough money to fund how much it's going to cost to put forward this agenda around the world. And at that time, they estimated around $5 trillion annually. It's actually more than that. It's around $8 trillion annually. And so we wonder where our money's going and why billions are leaving this country to an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity. That's where it's going. And then throw in, the Ukraine war, which is another.
And throw in the fact that they're absolutely destroying and decimating our energy basket. You don't have to look at Germany. Just study Germany. I did.
Right.
We're just regular guys that take it upon ourselves to educate ourselves. It's not hard to do. In the Camrose region, I went to a couple forums, one on solar, one on wind. And having the education of the fact that this is fraud, you can ask very good questions. Yes. And that these people don't like you showing up there. But the money behind this is staggering. The money behind this agenda, where it really concerns me here in Alberta, Mark, is to see oil industry, captains of the oil industry, at the table of this agenda. Right. After they made billions off of Alberta. Yes. Right? And now they've turned on Albertans, and they're getting we should just start going through this insanity here, because it is right there in front of us, and the evidence is real.
All right, so there it is, Bob. There's the document as it relates to Alberta. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I gotta get the. Are you looking up one, Mark?
I am. Yep. Are you with us, Bob?
Yep. So roll down, Mark. With Harper. You want to open the? I don't know if we need videos. Would you think open?
Do you want me to play the video?
No, let's just.
Okay.
Let's go to the minister's open up that.
Bob, you're getting some echo. Yeah, try your earbuds.
How's
There,
that?
that's way better. Thank you.
Yeah, that was just got expensive. If you want to, sorry, still getting it. Why don't we start with the Sustainability Act there, Mark, in 2009?
Sure.
I guess let's just 2007, so everybody can see that it was Harper that signed us on to the World Health Organization International Health Regulations, which were binding on all countries that signed on to that. And it's word for word what people just experienced trying to travel to and from Canada. I talked to a person in Red Deer that received an $8,000 ticket upon her arrival into Canada, and she wasn't COVID vaccinated, so she refused to go to a COVID quarantine center. So that was Harper that brought that in. And then if you want to go to 2009, the Sustainability Act. Down a bit.
There it is.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Open up that link there. Yeah, there's a link down below there. See where the Canadian, the Maple Leaf is? Federal, yeah, right there. So that's well, you explain what this is, Mark, the foundation for the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, I want to go back to the days of Mulrooney and talk about the lies and the cover that they've created. When they first signed on this in 1992, it was a conservative government under Brian Mulroney who went to Rio de Janeiro and first committed to this agenda. And it wasn't like Brian Mulroney came back to Canada, tasked all of his MPs to go and speak to their constituents regarding what it was that he just committed to. Because it wasn't politically expedient to do that. Because if they would have done that and they would have shown their hand, I can tell you most people would have forced them to resign if they tried to sell this unelected, unaccountable foreign entities agenda to them. And so they actually did the opposite of informing the people that they are elected to represent by referring to Agenda 21 as a conspiracy theory, which we know is complete hogwash. We know that they committed to it in 92. And so through that process, it did go through its own evolution. Then, of course, the Liberals came in and they implemented a lot of this agenda through the bureaucracy. And it wasn't like the Liberals brought together the public service and said, hey, we got a wonderful agenda for all you folks, and we want you in the public service to help us implement it. That's not how it happened. It was very compartmentalized, very departmentalized, and nobody knew what was coming. So then we move into the Harper years, and then, Harper was the first government and the only government to first create law in this country governing the Federal Sustainability Act. And it was called the Federal Sustainability Act at that time. So they were the first government, the Conservatives were, to make this agenda now binding in our country, because it's law in this country. And now our governments are compelled to report our progress in achieving the goals of sustainable development to an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity based on this legislation.
I'm going to pause you there for a second. So my former organization, the Alberta Prosperity Project, Dennis Modray, I argued with him, and because he was telling me that it was Trudeau that brought it here. And he finally admitted that it was Harper, but nobody cares. But this is what we're dealing with in Alberta. These organizations are now trying to blame Albertans.
Right.
for not knowing this, and that is unbelievable that these the people are doing that. But it was Harper. Everybody understands that it was Harper and Mulroney that brought this to Canada first and foremost, laid law down to make it binding.
They're the only party to commit to this agenda in 92 and 2015. They're the only party. And then they passed the baton on to the Liberals and forced the Liberals to implement it. Yeah. That's how this ping pong works.
Let's open up the 2015, the Paris Climate Accord, and what that actually was. Yeah, right there. So if you just scroll down, it says right in there. This is, I'm going to open it up on my end too. So just so everybody knows, this is from the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. And it mentions the 2030 agenda sets out 17 sustainable development goals. It says right there, in September 2015, Canada joined 192 countries in committing to the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. That was Stephen Harper.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
So that's that. And then, as you say, the patsy, I'm no fan of Trudeau, but the guy's a puppet. Harper holds way more power globally than Trudeau ever will. Harper was, as you know, going to the Bilderberg meetings, and Kenny was also. And later in my document, you'll see where the former chief of staff came from that served under Kenny.
So did Brad Wall, by the way.
Brad Wall did too, eh?
Yep.
Unbelievable. This is what I thought I have once in a while, Mark, is we should connect with people in every province and just lay this, the roadmap of how this, who was involved in each province, who brought this to every province, and we need to start naming names, and we need to start naming names of the collaborators that are helping them hide this.
Right.
It's time. It's way past the point in time. My patience has run out a long time ago, especially when these talking heads start blaming Albertans for either the COVID vaccines or this agenda coming to our country. That is unbelievable. So anyways, we need to start doing that.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So if we go on, so now it's a fact that Harper brought it here. Mulroney, the Conservatives, laid the foundation down, laid the law in this country, and then we can move on to Alberta, Section 2.
Is it on this one, or should I back up?
Back up. Go back to the document. Yeah.
Okay.
So go down to Section 2, right there. Yep. So the agenda comes to Alberta. So Forte, financing of opportunity, financing of return to employment. The CEO of that organization is a World Economic Forum Global Shaper. His name is Nat Ware. He's from Australia. He's been in our Alberta legislature multiple times himself. And the role of this organization is right there. It works by retraining citizens to reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as it's part of its ongoing partnership with the World Economic Forum. And, he says right here in an interview, and the link is here to the podcast, where he admits that Canada is one of the nations they're working with. And the quote from him is, when it comes to the environment, it's like, how do we train people for the green jobs of the future? This is a way to do that. How do we reskill oil and gas workers and people in unsustainable industry so that we can prove that we can have a sustainable transition? Transition is a key word there, Mark, because this Forte has not only been working with the Alberta government, they've been working with the Trudeau Liberals. And they were just in Daniel Smith's office on July 16th. So if you scroll down some more,
yep,
that's a screenshot of the Alberta Lobbyist Registry. And yeah, Forte's been in and out in multiple government departments, rolling this out. Wellington Advocacy, if you go down a little bit further,
yep,
is a lobby organization that was created 1 year before COVID. And the payroll and board members of that organization are all inner circle operatives of Kenny, Harper, Doug Ford, Christy Clark when she was Premier of BC. Essentially the conservative power structure of Canada. Ray Novak sits on the board. Well, Ray Novak is a business partner with Harper on Harper and Associates, and they have connections to 80 political parties around the world. Everybody talks about the Trudeau Foundation, but there's the Trudeau Foundation, there's the Harper and Associates, there's the Bill Clinton Foundation. If you want to steal money as a politician, that's how you do it. When we send billions of dollars out of our country, as soon as it leaves our border, it's gone.
Right.
We have no way of tracking that.
Right.
So now all this money, like you say, that's going to the Ukraine, you want to launder money, taxpayer money, debt? Yeah, send it to the Ukraine.
Right. And build biolabs.
Yeah, exactly. So Wellington Advocacy has been the lobby organization working on behalf of Forte. And I mean, Brian Peckford said it last year, I think it was last year when he spoke in Calgary, that lobbyists are controlling our politicians. Of course they are. 100%. And now we're talking about these billionaire globalist lobbyists now. And, it's just, once you know, and it's horrifying. So there's a link there to the public lobby records. I urge everybody to go on there and play around. There's so many things you could find out there. Who are the politicians meeting with? What companies are they meeting with?
Right.
And you can open up all the documents there. There's the link, if you go further down, to Forte, to that podcast. And it starts at about the 18-minute mark. We don't have to play it, but it's just Nat Ware explaining what Forte is and what their purpose is, and that's that.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay.
If people want to.
Yeah, we'll maybe put the link to this document in there too. It's I was talking to Mark earlier, and we're going to keep updating this document. I got to add to it, and we'll make this, share it far and wide across Canada, and to warn Canadians what's going on, and and if we can add other provinces to this, we'll do so. So then, in 2014, when Danielle Smith was the leader of the Wildrose Party, 2014, the Redford PC Alberta government brought the World Economic Forum to Alberta for the first time to have energy and climate change talks, and the meeting was delayed, and Danielle Smith was not happy about that. And she expressed her disappointment in that.
Well, what I find interesting about Danielle Smith is she used to talk about Agenda 2030 quite frequently on her radio show. And all of a sudden, since she's been elected as premier, she hasn't said a word, like not a word.
Yeah, and I find it hard to believe that she doesn't understand how it came here. It's like Pierre Poilievre, putting up that website, Stop the Great Reset. That's political theater. And then Danielle Smith and Pierre can say, oh no, we don't want to work with the WF while they're working with the WF, while they're working with this, and I call it for what it is, a treasonous agenda, whether it's in broad daylight or not, like you said earlier, Mark. They didn't tell Canadians what this was about. They snuck it in. And
because they couldn't. Because you wouldn't be able to sell it to people. You just wouldn't. Because you're taking the sovereignty of our nation and putting it into the hands of an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity. You can't sell that to people.
You said sovereignty, and that triggers something in me. The Sovereignty Act, that foolish political theater. So back when I was still with the Alberta Prosperity Project, Dennis Modre and I were asked to meet with Rob Anderson with Free Alberta Strategy, where the Sovereignty Act came from. And there was very clear that that's a dead-end road. It says right in the UCP press release of the Sovereignty Act that they will respect the Supreme Court ruling. Of course they will. Right. And that's the dead-end road. It's game over at that point. It's nonsense to suggest that while this UCP government, while Danielle Smith is working with a global entity like this and restructuring our society, that they would even consider having a conversation about Alberta independence. It's absolute nonsense.
Right.
Completely. So then you can go down further and you can see that the UCP, through the Alberta Treasury branch, are partnered in building and installing a National Digital ID Trust Service. So if you want to pop that one open there, Mark, the National Digital Trust Service. So there it is. It uses the word collaborating with the Canadian government. And
Sure.
at the same time, February, now you can close that. And go to Neil Parmenter. He speaks about the National Digital ID. He's the president of the Canadian Bankers Association.
Okay, where's that?
It's down right there, right in the center of your screen. Neil
Okay.
Parmenter, yeah. If you want to just, I guess, do you want to play the video?
I could.
Okay, it's not that long. Actually, I can't hear it there, Mark. You could just close it up. I'll read his quote.
Identity and attributes. And it would unlock countless opportunities for Canadians to verify who they are safely, quickly, and securely, while only revealing the information necessary for each transaction. A fast, easy, and secure way to bank, sign up for government services, renew driver's licenses or health cards, shop, travel, and more. Canada's banks are perfectly situated to help lead the creation of a federated digital ID system between government and the private sector. The World Economic Forum agrees that banks and financial institutions should lead the path forward for digital ID. Banks are highly regulated and trusted. They have advanced cybersecurity and privacy technology, and they have the infrastructure to operate provincially and nationally. Banks are also at the forefront of working with fintech startups who are bringing revolutionary mobile and online products and services to Canadians. Digital ID can help consumers navigate between these apps and programs with trust and confidence, knowing their ID is protected at all times. A federated digital ID approach can also significantly reduce fraud, save taxpayer money, improve regulatory compliance, and make it easier to do business as an owner and as a consumer. In fact, the Canadian Bankers Association just launched a white paper with our recommendations on how to move forward with a federated digital ID framework. I encourage you to read it to learn more.
So did you catch that federated digital ID can improve regulatory compliance?
Yep.
Of course it can. And then the next part there, are you hearing this?
Yeah, I got a bit of an echo.
Okay.
Hang on a sec. I can fix it. Okay.
How's that? That's
Yep.
better.
Now you're good.
So, yes, Danielle Smith wrote a full article last April, and she endorsing the central bank digital currency. She referenced the World Economic Forum on it, and she stated that the Chinese citizens are voluntarily signing up for it, and they like it. Just another.
Of course they do. They've been living. They've been living under the boot of communism for the last 60 years.
Yeah, and she made some comments in there about how they could tax it, and there's a lot of potential tax revenue for what if they went to that system. But as you know, digital ID, a government-controlled central bank digital currency, along with social credit scores, game over. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So let's move on to taxpayer-funded climate change fraud there, Mark. As you can see, the timeline on how this arrived in Canada and Alberta, the political theater that the Conservatives suggest they oppose carbon taxes is such nonsense. They've been Poilievre and the Conservatives campaigned on carbon taxes. Industrial carbon taxes was theirs. In Alberta in December 2022, they tripled, the industrial carbon tax will be tripled to come in line with the federal program. Of course it will.
Yep.
And you can see, everybody can see right there, the net zero garbage, the emissions cut to Alberta, 30% to start. And the carbon capture fraud, that's a concerning one. The UCP partnered with Trudeau, and there's $31.5 billion coming to Alberta, more taxpayer money to fund these projects. 70% of the carbon capture projects are funded by Albertans, but at the end of the day, burying carbon, CO2 back into the ground is ridiculous. And in BC,
Of course it is.
they have carbon capture started up there, and they're pulling CO2 from the atmosphere. Isn't that neat?
Which will only serve to kill most of our vegetation.
I'm going to jump back a bit to the beginning. I forgot to mention something.
Yep. Go ahead.
Stephen Harper, you don't have to go back, but Stephen Harper was the first Canadian Prime Minister to say out loud that Canada needs to phase out not only its production, but its consumption of carbon-based energy. And the city of Nanaimo last month just passed the law that's coming next year. They're making it against the law to use natural gas in commercial and residential heating appliances. Isn't that neat?
The cheapest form of energy.
Yeah. They don't care. People say, well, they can't do that. It's going to fail. Yes, of course it's going to fail.
Right.
Well, stop and think about that. They know it's going to fail, but they're doing it anyway.
Of course they know it's going to fail.
Yeah. So
but it's all by design.
It's by design.
It's by design to fail. Like the whole Agenda 2030 and its 17 goals. When you go through it, you can identify contradictions throughout the whole thing. Like when they talk about eliminating hunger. Well, how are you going to eliminate hunger when you're restricting farmers' ability to grow food? When you restrict fertilizer, when you restrict, all of these mechanisms that farmers use to grow food, that supplies people with food around the world. It's all a contradiction, and they know it is a contradiction because everything leads back to depopulation.
Yeah, starving people out. So we're back in the Peace Country here for a week and a half or so, and there's a meeting at Northern Sunrise Council, the municipal council, and they're having a meeting to talk about the restricting how many chickens you could have and cattle and whatnot.
Sure.
So I'm going to go. And that's the thing. These municipal councillors also need to wake up and understand this agenda very intimately. Anybody that's a politician at any level, a bureaucrat at any level, anybody that's at the front of this, on the front line, needs to wake up and weigh into this and understand what this will mean for the future of their children and grandchildren.
100%.
Because they too are patsies in this. They might not understand that little piece of the puzzle, what it looks when you snap it in place to the overall picture. So I'm going to go and make a presentation. I hope I get an opportunity to speak, even if it's for a few minutes. I'll be very concise and speak boldly, and we need to start doing this at our local municipal councils. And I'll do this in the Camrose region. I want to go meet with all the councils down there. I made a point of going to meet them in the campaign when I ran down there, and I'll continue those conversations because they're important. And a lot of these people just are probably ignorant, and I don't say that in a mean way, but ignorant to the actual reality of this. So,
yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, so to keep on going down here, Mark, and you can see what I already referenced, the Alberta tax on industrial carbon dioxide emissions will triple by 2030. It's a little further down. Right there, December 2022. If you just want to open up that link. Sonia Savage made that announcement. There we go. So they kind of snuck that in for Christmas when nobody's paying attention.
Right.
And right in the Financial Post. So that's the thing. I did the same thing, Mark, as all people do. I'm not laying blame on anybody for being busy and living their lives, because I was doing the same thing for decades, and I got lucky. We Dana and we sold our oil and gas service company, our interest in that, and that's why I had time. I had a full year. I took off, and that's when I did a lot of my research and due diligence. That's when I wade into the political arena. Never ever thinking that I would be running as a candidate or speaking in front of large crowds and whatnot. But here I am.
But you have to, Bob.
You have to. Yeah, you have to. And that's what I say to everybody, Mark. That especially the people that are passionate. Get up on that stage, grab a mic. And when we do town halls, Mark, it's so nice to see people coming to the mic now, and I welcome that. So a true 100%. True town hall is you open up the mic and you answer every question that's there. Right. You don't screen them through cue cards as I'll say it again, Alberta Prosperity Project does. I had a question heading up to the stage. I couldn't make an event in Airdrie. Rob Anderson was speaking. And my question relates to exactly what we're talking about here. And Dennis Modray pulled my question. So it was censored. And that's what I'm talking about. When we hold a town hall, there can be no censorship.
No.
At all.
No. And this is why, and I keep coming across these folks at these town hall meetings. They appreciate their ability to get up and ask questions and have somebody actually answer them. Because most of our politicians, if not all of them, just evade the questions.
Yeah.
We went to a town hall here, municipal town hall, with the mayor and a councillor. And I went up there. I was allowed one question, even though the person after me was allowed to get up there 3 times. And I asked the mayor in Saskatoon, Charlie Clark, I asked him, I think you need to tell the people in this room why you've committed to ICLEI, why you've committed to this agenda created by an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity. And what was his response to that question? Oh, you don't have to worry about that conspiracy theory. It doesn't mean anything. And I'm literally holding my phone where it says Saskatoon is partnered with ICLEI and other communities that are partnered with that organization. It's phenomenal.
So just explain what that is, ICLEI. If you don't mind.
So ICLEI is a group of 2,500 municipalities around the world that have committed to Agenda 2030 and allowing themselves to be dictated. So, for example, in Saskatoon, we have a $70 million deficit in our budget. And the reason we have a $70 million deficit in our budget is because the city is running around building sidewalks like they're going out of style. Because the new urban agenda dictates from the UN, dictates that municipalities prioritize pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic, and they're building bike lanes like they're going out of style in a province that's frozen 8 months of the year.
So pause right there. So just so people understand, 15-minute cities doesn't mean you're necessarily going to drive 15 minutes.
No.
That's not what that means.
You're going to walk.
So all these bike paths and walking, absolutely. So
that's what this all is. It's all a big setup.
They're going to make cars illegal.
It'll be a surveillance district. It'll be a police district. It'll be a prison district where everything you do is surveilled. Everything.
So I am very confident that this will fail.
Yes.
Because people aren't going to stand for this.
No.
It's utter nonsense, but we better get going because I'm getting angry just talking about it.
It's all good.
I just want to move on now to the meat and potatoes here of what we're dealing with in Alberta here, and this really concerns me. So Mark, I grew up like a lot of people did in Western Canada. We grew up in poverty. There's a lot of years that it was tough times, and coming from a family of 9. My mom and dad did their best, and there's moments in my life as a child where I saw as I say, the dark hearts of man that ripped them off and, set us back and whatnot. But it was Alberta oil and gas that lifted my family up. And, with that opportunity, it created hope, and we made the most of it. We worked hard. And now I'm seeing captains of the oil industry, like I said, being at the table of this globalism, this nonsense, this fascism. And so carbon capture, let's move on to that. So like I said, 70% is funded by. There's the announcement of what's going on in Alberta here with the carbon capture storage. So I woke up one morning, Mark. I was at my sister's cabin, Barb, at the Canuso, and as soon as I woke up, a thought came to my mind: who holds the patent on carbon capture? Well, as you can see, there's a company out of Calgary, Alberta, Carbon Engineering Limited. David Keith was the head of that organization. He sits on the board now. Well, David Keith was with the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change. He's written papers on carbon capture. He is actually a fan of geosolar engineering also. There's some videos with him making those presentations.
Sure.
If anybody doesn't know what that is, that's chemtrails of trying to cool off the planet. And that was one of Mike Hume's concerns, that they were going to start playing this game of trying to, do that. But it was Murray Edwards, the founder and chair of Canadian Natural Resources, partnered with Bill Gates, and they threw in a couple $1 million to start up that company. And they hold a patent on carbon capture. And this organization is the organization in BC that's already fired up a carbon capture unit that's pulling CO2 from the atmosphere.
Well, and so one thing that people need to understand is all of these multinational corporations, all these big corporations, in order for them to receive the capital that they need to operate, they need to commit to the environmental social governance model, which is really just a mechanism using corporations to help achieve the goals of sustainable development. And through corporations and through, BlackRock and Vanguard and others feeding money to these corporations, the corporations are almost bound by it because they can't afford to operate without that injection of capital.
Yeah, I see that now clearly, that the bankers have these guys over a barrel. But at the end of the day, sorry, can you just scroll up a bit there? We'll go to the where I was talking about there. Yeah, it's a little bit more. Yeah, there's David Keith there. That's what he's done. He's been with the UN, WF major contributor, the co-author of the third assessment report for the IPCC. Yep. And the lead author, all of that. So he's entrenched in this, and also Paul Martin brought him into Canada, by the way, with the Sustainable and Energy Science and Tech Strategy Department. But I was going to say, with the captains of industry, and we'll just move on, and I'll name another one here, Michael Binion. So Michael Binion is another junior oil and gas energy tycoon in Alberta. He still owns High Arctic Energy Services. Mm. It was interesting. APP, Alberta Prosperity Project, held an event in Calgary, and Alex Epstein was there, and he spoke. And you know who Alex is? He's
I do.
A great young man that is a proponent of carbon-based energy. Yep. And as he calls this agenda is an anti-human agenda, Alex says. Well, he and Michael Binion got into it because Mr. Binion was talking about net zero and carbon capture, and Alex was having none of it. So that's the reason I focus on Michael Binion, was because I know there was meetings between him and Dennis Moldray and Daniel Smith in early 2022. Right. And in a meeting I'll mention earlier or later in the document here with Take Back Alberta, David Parker. Yeah. Yeah. So he referenced Michael Binion as one of the individuals having the ear of the premier. At the time it was Kenny. And then there he was meeting with Daniel Smith and Dennis Moldray. And then Parker also referenced Murray Edwards as having the ear of the premier also. Right. And so that's these lobbyists controlling the politicians, dictating, which way they go. Yep. And Binion is close friends with Harper. This is the thing. So close friends with Harper. He won an award from the Canadian Taxpayers Association or Federation, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
As he's, as they're getting this money from the taxpayers for all this fraud, this carbon capture nonsense, and he's winning awards. So he's entrenched as a lobbyist. One of the individuals, the conservative ministers that Harper was sending to the Davos summits as leaders, leading committees for the WF, is Joe Oliver from Alberta. Well, Joe Oliver sits on the board of High Arctic Energy Services of the business interest of Michael Binion. And Ed Fast is another one of those 5 ministers Harper was sending to the Davos summits as leaders for the WF. David Parker used to work for Ed Fast. These are too many coincidences to not to focus on. And I'll say this right now: I've hand delivered this document to many MLAs, ministers.
Yep.
Nobody's challenged me on it. I've asked for
they won't because they can't. They can't.
What does Parker do? And even Chris Scott, what do?
Yeah.
They attack me. They attack my character rather than focusing on the elephant in the room.
Right.
And that should tell everybody right there. If they don't want to talk about this,
right,
that should be a red flag.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll move on there. And I just, Murray Edwards, he was the one of 7 founders of the Alberta Enterprise Group, another lobby organization, a very powerful one in Alberta here. And Daniel Smith was named the president of that organization in 2021. And that's when Danielle started supporting net zero, carbon capture, carbon pricing, hydrogen, all this nonsense.
Naturally.
And, and that's when she started doing that. And, watching that all play out, I reached out to Daniel Smith in an email, and I have a reply from her. And my concern, I'll get to it in a second here, was with the chief of staff to Kenny, where he came from, and with the COVID stuff. And her response to me was, I'm monitoring the situation. And then she becomes a premier.
Right.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So I learned, I make a reference here to Todd Lowen, a man I once trusted, a man I invested a lot of time and energy in, and he let us down. He let us down in a big way in Alberta here with his failure to table the research of Dr. Paul Alexander and Dr. Peter McCullough. I'll go on a tangent here. A meeting that was held on November 10th, 2021 with Dr. Malone and Dr. Alexander. Dr. Hodgkinson was there also. Dr. McCullough couldn't make that meeting, but he was intended on attending the follow-up meetings. But it was his research, Dr. McCullough's and Dr. Alexander, that we were promised that Shane Getson, who is now the government whip, they don't even call it the party whip in Alberta anymore, Mark, they call it the government whip, that Shane Getson, who had a life-threatening vaccine injury the month prior to that meeting, never said a darn thing to us.
No.
He played that like a card during the Ottawa and Coutts convoys, played it as a political sympathy card. So I asked Todd why he wouldn't table that research, and he said he didn't want to look like an extremist, and they didn't want to. Unbelievable. And so I learned of Wellington advocacy lobby organization in Todd's office while Todd was sitting right beside me. Nathan Stanky is Todd's staffer, and Nathan has worked behind the scenes in politics right back to when Drew Barnes was the Wild Rose health critic. And Samantha Stanky, Nathan's wife, is now on the UCP provincial board. She was an advisor to Todd Lowen, and I have a text comment from her because I didn't, I was angry when Todd told me that, and I told him that I had to go because I didn't want to say anything I regret, and I slept on it, and then I sent in a text message to Samantha, Nathan, and Todd, questioning why Todd wasn't going to work with these international experts. As you know, Peter McCullough went on to work with Senator Ron Johnson. He's done great things. He's speaking before the European Parliament and all that. And her response was just absolutely staggering, and they lost me forever. And that they knew more people would be hurt, they said, and they didn't do anything with it. So this is what we're facing. I bring this up because, even though these politicians, the most trusted politician in Alberta, knew that people will be hurt, that people will die, that children, because remember, at that time, the urgency from us was that the Alberta children were going to get vaccinated, and we were going to hope to inspire other Canadian provinces to start having this conversation. And they didn't do anything. No. They sat back in the weeds as cowards, and they covet their paychecks more than supporting the well-being of the people they represent. 100%. And I'll say this again. I said it in a podcast, and this is when the anger from Mr. Scott came out, and I'll say it again if he's listening right now. When Todd Lowen's wife approached me at Crooked Creek, Alberta, weeks after Todd was ousted from the UCP caucus for doing the right thing, for demanding Kenny step down. And she said to me, not a hello or nothing, she said, I don't know what we do without Todd's salary. And at that time, what disgusted me was the fact that so many people's lives were being destroyed. There were suicides happening, and they're more worried about a paycheck.
Of course they are.
That's disgusting. So I'm going to move on because I'll speak to this every single time I can to share that information out with Canadians, not just Albertans, with Canadians. This is the level of cowardice that our politicians are operating at.
Yes. 100%. There's zero accountability. There's zero responsibility. They avoid it at all costs.
So one question people ask me, what could you do as a lone MLA, especially an independent MLA? Well, first off, I'd be inviting Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Paul Alexander and more to have a conversation with Albertans. And I would be tabling their research that is absolutely damning now in the Alberta legislature. I would be advocating against this nonsense openly. I would have access to all the files. They wouldn't be able to redact anything on me. So that's what I'd do. I would start fighting for the people, for my family, 100%. Friends, and neighbors. That's what I would do. And I know you do the same thing, Mark.
Absolutely. I can't wait for the opportunity.
Me too. Me too. So UNDRIP, I got to expand on this component of the document here. It's it needs a lot of work, but I mean, we know what this is. It's a land grab. They're they're working with Native Indian communities and First Nations. I speak of it frequently.
Which is a corrupt system in and of itself.
I was just going to say that. I have people that I also once trusted that are chiefs. And in understanding what they did to their people through COVID, absolute viciousness. No, I'll be speaking my mind, and I know there's a lot of money changing hands here as their people are being absolutely destroyed, and they've been living as prisoners for far too long. And as you know, my Native Indian ancestry reaches back to my fourth great grandfather, Chief Blackpowder, and my third great uncle, Chief Big Bear, the last holdouts to the signing of Treaty 6. They are without hope. Right. And in the first year of COVID, actually just when the vaccines were rolling out, I made a point of touring out to a lot of communities, First Nation communities around the north here.
Good.
And they saw it. I mean, there was a pretty easy conversation. I didn't lead them. They said, this is like communism.
Right.
They know.
They've been living under it forever.
Yeah. And they were the first ones to get, to be lined up to get jabbed with this COVID vaccine.
100% they were. Yep.
So UNDRIP, I'll just say, as you know, it's a Trojan horse. It's a divide and conquer. It is a United Nations policy that is meant to steal the land. That's it.
Yep.
100%. Pit neighbor against neighbor. So we'll leave that one there. But I mean, it's another thing that the UCP have it referenced. It's in the government site. Daniel Smith referenced it multiple times. And it's not good. So this next person, the former chief of staff to Jason Kenney, Jamie Huckabee. He grew up, born and raised in Lethbridge, Alberta. my MLA, Dan Williams, was a 6-year staffer under Kenny when Kenny was in Ottawa. And I supported Dan. I supported Kenny. I poured my heart and soul into campaigning and, helping them get elected, helping to play my small part in building the UCP, because I was angry at the NDP. I thought it was the NDP that stole opportunity from my fellow Albertans and Canadians. And I'll tell you what, so when I started learning about the Green New Deal, which I had heard about before, I didn't realize it was rebranded into the Great Reset. And it was Halloween night, and interestingly enough, it was Nathan Stanky that sent me the letter that from Archbishop Blayone to President Trump, warning Trump about the Great Reset. And I was halfway through it, and Jamie Huckabay's name came to my mind in a very strong way, and I went, okay, somebody's talking to me. So this is what I discovered. It took me about 30 minutes. Jamie, so I got to say a quote that Dan told me. So it was the day that Jason Kenney won the original UCP leadership race. And, by that time I was having conversations with the inner circle, and I was meeting a lot of people, and I was like a sponge. I soaked it all up. And Dan told me that, so the man that would become the chief of staff, he didn't say it like that at the time, but he said that Jamie paused his very lucrative private sector career to come back to Alberta to help. Yep. And that's why I thought, well, Jamie's a good guy, good Albertan. He wants to help, and I enjoyed talking to him. But I was deceived in a big way. So Jamie was from 2010 to 2015 was the vice president of Gerson Larman Group, another lobby organization out of New York City. On the board of directors you can see here, Barack Obama's former campaign manager, Hillary Clinton's former campaign manager, the Democrat National Committee chairman. And so not conservatives by any stretch of the imagination. Right. And, Joseph Stiglitz. Well, Joseph Stiglitz, as you can see, he was the top senior economic advisor to President Bill Clinton. He was with the WF since 95 and with the world, the IPCC. He was the co-chair of the High-Level Commission on Carbon Prices, on carbon taxing. Yep. And this is an architect of what we're living through here. Yep. So that's where the chief of staff to Jason Kenney, to the Conservative Party of Alberta, came from. What do you need to see to go, wait a second, everyone, just whoa, let's pump the brakes here. Maybe the UCP are not what we thought they were. Maybe the Conservative Party of Canada are not what they thought they were. Right, 100%. So it's all there. So, I was happy to see in the National Citizens Inquiry, Vincent Gerses, former police officer from Ontario, highly trained, as you can see in the document, highly trained in forensic investigations. And look what he says here. I'm going to read it out loud. The World Economic Forum Canadian leadership members is of concern. Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, had made a comment that we have penetrated over half of the cabinet. The comment had come up once in Parliament, asking the question relative to this connection. Immediately, an excuse to some microphone-related problem was made. That question has never come up again in the House of Commons. No. So he goes on to say, it appears that there are members possibly in other political parties as well. Relative to the World Economic Forum, organized crime now is very sophisticated, and generally those people that are very, very wealthy with incredible power and access are positioned very well to be very effective criminally. 100%. Is there any evidence to suspect, reasonable suspicion of the need to investigate potential criminal conspiracy? Yes, we believe that there is, absolutely. So I'm glad to, like we were talking earlier, to see more people waking up to what's happening, how it happened. And it is going to be a bad day for these politicians that have sat back in the weeds as cowards, as complicit participants in this betrayal of Albertans and Canadians. I cannot wait for the day where they have to sit in front of a crowd and answer these questions of this betrayal.
Right.
And I am concerned, Mark, as now the COVID harms are coming to fruition, and parents and grandparents are losing their children. And when they learn of that meeting that was held on November 10th, where they could have been warned that their children were going to be hurt,
Right.
and these politicians sat back in the weeds, I'll say it again, as cowards. You cowards sat back and allowed this to happen. And now you're letting our country and provinces fall to an unelected foreign entity. Shame on you all, and shame on you political collaborators that are allowing this treasonous betrayal to happen.
100%, Bob. Very
Mark
well said.
and I, yeah, and more guys like us, Mark, we know that are standing with us.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're not stopping. We're just going to get louder and louder, and the
100%.
people that are gathering behind us are growing in numbers.
Yes.
And your day of reckoning will come. So there's my rant, and that is a promise. That is not a threat.
Oh, it will come.
That's a promise.
It will come.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind. It will come.
Yeah. So that's the document. I urge everybody, if you can put the link to that document in the chat there, Mark.
Yeah. You
And
bet.
I welcome calls from across Canada. You know, at my time at the Alberta Prosperity Project, my dream was that template was still supposed to be grassroots, and the dream that I had was that communities in Alberta would be connected, direct lines of communication, and communities across Canada would be directed, and we would cheer one another on. But we're still going to do that, Mark. And you and I were having many conversations earlier, and we'll continue these conversations and liberate all people of Canada.
Well, and the thing that people need to understand is this is not necessarily a fight that we can win overnight.
No.
This is a protracted fight. There's no question about it. Because it's all about information getting to the people. And as soon as the people have the information, then it's over. It's over.
The truth will set them free.
Yes. Yes. Well said, my friend.
Well, this has been great. Thank you, Mark, for doing this. And can I
Yeah,
make the
my
announcement?
pleasure.
Can I make the announcement now for October 15th?
Sure.
So October 15th, we're having a fundraiser for James Sowery and Shauna Krebich. James was the Canadian trucker that was leaving Coots in his hydrovac truck, and he accidentally ran over a pylon, and he was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. He was convicted for that. And he's waiting sentencing. The sentencing was supposed to happen August 30th, and it's been hanging over his head. Well, James has been working hard helping the Coots boys, Jerry Morin, Chris Lysak, and Tony Olenek, and Chris Carber, and others that have been. I mean, that's James. He's got a heart of gold, and he is worried about his friends and neighbors. And so we're going to help James, and we're going to have this fundraiser for him. And Shauna Krebich was a longtime friend. I was working with her at the Alberta Prosperity Project, and she was my campaign manager in the provincial campaign. She is an amazing person, and also a caring and kind person that cares about her community. And Jackie Lovely, the UCP MLA, had charges leveled at Shauna for fear of personal injury. It's criminal charges. When I read through disclosure, I was laughing out loud because I thought there's no way this will go to trial. It's going to trial. One of the accusations that UCP MLA Jackie Lovely leveled at Shauna was that Shauna scaled her third floor balcony apartment and rearranged the furniture on the balcony and tried to open the door. Well, anyone that knows Shauna knows her mobility is limited. She's got health problems and she's got knee issues. That is laughable. And then another another line of disclosure was something like, I could be wrong a bit on the wording, but Shauna has switched sides and she's now working with Bob Blayone. This is going to trial.
Good.
And the justice system in this province is a joke.
Yeah, it's a joke in every province, Bob.
Yeah. So what is this? What is UCP MLA Jackie Lovely doing? It's called political retribution. It's spiteful, and I will be calling for her resignation. And we're going to take action as a community. We're going to try to enact recall on Miss Lovely. If she's going to act this unbecoming, number one, not advocating for James Sowery. James is also her constituents. Number two, for attacking one of her constituents. Why? Because Shauna was on the UCP board of Jackie's. And through COVID, Shauna did like I did, and she's trying to hold her politician, the MLA, accountable. And she is very kind, diplomatic, patient. She's all about conversation. And for this to happen to an individual like Shauna is completely unacceptable.
Right.
And we as a community are going to share this out, and I promise you, people in that community are not going to be happy with this. So if anybody's watching on Jackie's team, I would urge you to ask her to stand down on this, because we're not going to back down ourselves. And that's not a threat again, that's a promise. We are going to hold you accountable for what you're doing to these people and what you're not doing for James. Absolutely. And that's what we can do as people. We just need to stand together in communities and advocate for one another. That's it.
100%. And so, just in that vein, I just want to, I want to thank the people of Saskatchewan for voicing their opinion on SOGI and what's happening in our schools and how much of an effect that has had on the Saskatchewan government.
Yeah.
That's the people that are doing this. It's not, Scott Moe didn't have an epiphany one day and decide he's gonna flip the script. No, it was the people forcing them to make the decision they had to make, because they know if they didn't, they'll be turfed.
Yeah.
That's our job.
100%, Mark, and that's our job to inspire people to understand the solution is right in front of us.
Yes.
One thing that David Parker said to me in that meeting, in politics, when you show up with people, you show up with power. He spoke of people as quota. But when people like you and me stand with our friends and neighbors, we're not looking them as quota, we're looking them as equals.
Yes.
And we will show up with power.
Yes.
Watch for it to happen. It's going to happen.
It will happen. It's inevitable, Bob.
Absolutely. And these people need to be run out of not only Alberta, but Canada, and never, ever be allowed again to work in politics for what they're doing.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Very well said, Bob. All right. So I'll be there on the 15th.
Awesome. Look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, that'll be good. All right, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, you have a good night, and give your lovely wife Dana a hug for all of us. And yeah, I will do the same.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, my friend. Take care.
You too.
All right. Bye. All right. So there was a very enlightening show highlighting how Agenda 2030 was brought to Alberta. Very solid human being, that Bob Blayone. Salt of the earth. I love the guy. And he's right. Inevitably, we will win this. But people have to come together, and we have to, just the people. Forget about the politics. Just the people have to come together, like we did with SOGI, and forcing our government to act. We can do this. We can shut this whole thing down if we come together. And it's how it's got to be. And it'll happen. Slowly but surely, it's going to happen. Anyways, folks, that's going to be a wrap for me. One second. All right, so that's going to be a wrap. Thanks for joining, everybody. We had good numbers in here tonight, I think, and we'll get there. We'll get there. And just a reminder, again, we had to change the date for the March Against Agenda 2030 from October 21st to November 4th. That's also a Saturday. We did that because America is having a protest to protect the children from these insane school teachers and school board federations. And it's bleeding over into Canada. So it looks like there's going to be maybe another protest, maybe another march on the 21st of October. So I decided, you know what, I'll lay down and create another date. So it's November 4th is the March Against Agenda 2030. And I've been waiting 22 years to see this march come to fruition across the country. And I'm hoping people in every community across this country are making plans for November 4th so that we can show them that the people are not on board with this. The people have never voted for this. The people have never been given an opportunity to reject this, to denounce this. They've never been given that opportunity because all our politicians never talk about it. Ever. Unless it's Justin Trudeau saying COVID has given us an opportunity to reach and meet the goals of sustainable development, in his words. Anyways, that's enough. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Share this out, and we'll see you next time. I hope to have Salim on either Saturday night or Sunday night, and we're going to talk about what happened in Parliament a week ago. And Salim has some interesting perspective on that. So stay tuned for that one. Anyways, guys, ciao for now.
This puppet show stays on because of you.